This El Camino is in for a huge transformation. From a primered pile of junk to a modern monster. But the old parts aren't going anywhere without a fight.
Ow!
We're gonna work day and night to transform this brute with a modern suspension and brake system, a clean-running fuel-injected V8, and more eye and ear candy than you can shake a drive shaft at. It's gonna take some hard work.
There you go, there you go.
And a little luck.
Sure is pretty. Too bad it's under the car.
But if we pull it off, we'll end up with a custom classic that rides and drives like a modern muscle masterpiece. Stick around to see how this hot El Camino Resto mod turns out. I've got a really big fetish with muscle cars, okay? And I just love the bodies of the muscle cars. But I'm also in love with the tuner technology and the speed and the new technologies and the air intakes and the suspensions and the DVDs and the interiors and the paint jobs and everything, all of that. So I had this vision. I saw an El Camino that was for sale. So I said, wait a minute, if I take that body, which is a sweet body, by the way, throw some tuner parts underneath it, it's like a secret car. Nobody knows. When it rolls up, they say, oh, that's a cool El Camino, but they don't know what's underneath. And what's underneath is power. Tuner power, suspension power, cold air intakes. And then the interior, trick that out too. You know, get a new dashboard, get some new interior. On the outside, give it a wicked paint job. It would just be the perfect combination between both worlds, the old and the new. It'd be awesome.
First of all, Andrew called me and explained his great vision to me, so I got all jazzed up. I'm like, yeah, right?
Come on, this rules, and you
wow.
know it.
Wow. It was awful. I was like, are you serious? It was a nightmare.
We're really pumped about updating the suspension and steering on the El Camino. But since we're pretty much rebuilding the entire car, we decided to yank off the front clip and pull out the engine first. It's not something we have to do to install the new suspension and steering parts, but since it's all coming out, it can't hurt to make a little room to work. We've made vast improvements to the suspension in this vehicle. First of all, ripped all the old stuff out of there and put tubular control arms in the front, which are tremendously lighter than the old ones. And if you want to gain speed, you want to also lose some of the weight on that car, so that's going to help there too. The control arms connect the wheels to the frame, so the first step in removing them is to pull the cotter pins and start unbolting. Working with the old rusty parts can be quite a challenge. Then we unbolt the ball joints, and we beat and beat with bigger and bigger hammers until they come loose. Next, we unbolt the outside end of the lower control arms from their spindles. We run into more of the same resistance from rusted parts.
This is so weak. You know, all the bolts are different sizes over here. So weak.
Not surprising.
I know this thing is like a Franken car.
After the lower control arms are released, the upper assemblies can be removed along with the spindles. The passenger side came right off, but the driver's side is really putting up a fight.
This way?
Yeah. It's gonna move off the jack stands.
Ow!
You all right?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, excellent.
Cool.
Awesome, sorry about the fingers.
That's all right. I still have my gloves on.
Now that the old suspension is out, we're ready to install the new front suspension. And the first step is to bolt in the lighter, tubular lower control arms. The fit's a little tight, so we use a plastic hammer to work the first arm into place without damaging the new powder-coated parts. The uppers slide right onto the original mounts as well. After the control arms are mounted, we attach the spindle and brake assembly to the upper arm. Then the coil spring slides into place and gets turned to lock into the upper mount. We use a floor jack to compress the spring and raise the lower control arm until the ball joint on the lower arm can be installed.
Oh, nice.
Then we do the whole thing again on the other side and add in the upgraded shocks to finish the project.
Jack that beast to the sky.
Doing it, babe.
We put the car up on stands so we can pull off the rear wheels and roll underneath for a closer look.
The suspension is shot.
One look, and we decide that the best way to rebuild our rear suspension is to pull out the whole rear end. So we disconnect the parking brake lines first, then the brake lines up top. After the brake lines are released, we hit up the shocks, then it's time to unbolt the rear end. When we were unbolting everything and taking everything out of there, the thing was a mess. Check that out. It's not even on, man. This thing, hold on. All different size bolts everywhere. We had tools everywhere to accommodate for it. Some bolts were not even there. Some bolts didn't have nuts on the end of them. It was ridiculous. Removing the bolts from the upper trailing arms is extra tough, and it really takes 2 sets of hands to pull it off.
Nice work. I'm going to bed.
Next, we lower the rear axle from the car, remove the bolts from the lower trailing arms, and now that the rear end is out, we'll place it on the workbench so we can start our rebuild.
Nice.
It's steady?
Yep. We're good.
All right, cool.
Why don't you work on that diff cover while I grab the brakes?
All right.
I remove the cover to let the gear oil drain. After the fluid is drained, I loosen the retaining bolt and pull out the spider cross pin. Then, I use a magnet to pull the retaining pins so the axles can slide right out.
Grab the end, because I don't want the splines to tear up the axle seals.
All right.
Nice work.
Thank you. Next, the backing plates are removed. We undo the brake line connection at the top of the housing and pull them off with the rest of the drum brake assembly. You know, with these drum brakes, man, one spring goes, you are boned. I hate these things.
Yep.
The disc brakes are nice. Oh, you got it?
Yep.
Good riddance. The disc brake brackets bolt on right where the old drum backing plates were removed. Then, we slide in the axles, and I replace the C-clips, the pin, and tighten up the locking bolt.
Drew, check out these cross-drilled and slotted rotors.
Nice. I love these. I've used these a bunch, man. These are great because they expel heat and gases off the rotor, and they never fade, so you're always going to get a good stop. Awesome. The discs look really great, and mounting the calipers is easy compared to pulling the axles to mount the discs. There's just 2 bolts that hold them to the brackets, and they're good to go. I love these brakes, man. These rule.
They're awesome.
We scrape off the old differential gasket and reinstall the cover with a new gasket to seal it up. Then, Christy fills the differential with fresh lube. The new, stronger trailing arms are really going to lock in the rear end for better handling. Installing the lowers is a breeze. Next, we install some larger, beefier shock mounts to further strengthen the rear end and bolt the lowered sport springs into place. All right, upper trailing arms. I love these, man. They're adjustable. Gonna eliminate wheel hop and just launch right out of the gate. These things rule. After the upper trailing arms are bolted up, we use the floor jack to move the rear end back under the car. It's a little difficult to maneuver it around the frame and exhaust. When we finally get it positioned, we bolt in the trailing arms along with a new set of chassis braces to eliminate flex in the car's frame. After the fresh set of shocks are bolted into the top mounts, we jack up the rear end until the bottom mounts are close enough to meet up with the shocks and tighten them down.
Sweet.
The new disc brakes came with a set of new lines and everything. When I installed them, the clamps that came with them to clamp them down, I couldn't get them past the coil, so I ended up having to weld the mounts up into the car. Once the brackets are in, we hook up the soft lines to the calipers, and after the parking brake cables are attached, the rear suspension and brake conversion is complete. This Camino is starting to come to life. The new suspension kit is killer, and these disc brakes are a colossal improvement over those old drum brakes.
Yeah, it looks great, but this is only half the system.
I know.
We still have to do the master and the front lines.
That's the plan.
Cool.
Coming up, as the brake project is completed, the truth is exposed. I love cotter pins. But the feelings are not returned. Cotter pins hate me. And the consequences could be deadly. After the front clip is in place, we bolt it up at the cowl. Body shims are used to get a good alignment. Then we jump over to the front end and tighten up the 2 body bolts in front of the wheel wells. It can be hard to find a spot for the engine control unit, or ECU, which is the heartbeat of the car. But I got lucky, because the El Camino has a perfect spot for it. 1 screw for the bracket and the unit pops right in. After the bracket is mounted, I plug in the harness and snap the cover into place. After we top off the power steering fluid, we can step back and take a look at the new engine in the car for the first time. 90% of the reason I got this car is for the body, so to see it actually come back together again, because the Camino's got that evil stance, man, that I just love. So to see it come back in and grin at me like that, tasty. Now, it's time to take a look at how we're gonna mate the LT1's exhaust manifold with the El Camino's exhaust. Flex pipe, and you cut the flanges off the downpipes. What's your plan?
Well, the LT1's downpipes didn't fit with the Camino's exhaust.
Yeah.
So we're gonna take this flex pipe, we're gonna go underneath the car, we're gonna measure, like so.
Right.
And then we're gonna take it to the muffler shop and have them fab us a pipe with cats in it.
Oh, it's a good idea. But when you do that, how are you gonna keep it from bending before you take it to the exhaust shop?
Take a piece of tape like so,
Yeah.
put it on the bend where you've measured that it
Right.
fits properly.
Yeah.
And then if it bends, tape creases.
Oh,
Therefore,
cool.
you know you're wrong, bend back,
Straightens
voila.
out. Did you make that up?
I did.
Pretty smart.
Thanks.
All right, well, let's mock it up.
Sounds good. With the factory flanges stuck in the end of the flex pipes, we work them into position. Then we use the tape to set the angle of the bends and mark the locations for the oxygen sensors, then where the cross member is. Plus, the final length of the pipe so the shop knows where to mount the catalytic converters.
That is a cool little trick.
Thanks.
I'm gonna get to work on the cooling system.
All right, I'm off to the muffler shop. I'll be back soon.
See ya. The new engine has a closed-loop cooling system, and it needs an upgraded radiator with overflow tank fittings. Along with the new radiator, I'm also installing an electric fan that will plug right into the harness. The original engine we pulled out of Camino had a fan in the front of the engine, but this new LT1, because of the accessory belts and stuff in front of the engine, it can't have a fan in the front. So gotta have an independent fan running on the radiator to keep it cool. We put in an easy-to-install custom radiator, and because it's aluminum, it's also way more efficient. Because our new radiator wasn't made to connect to the LT1 engine, it'll take some smarts to fit the radiator hoses. But later, I'm gonna go to the auto parts store and do some trial and error hose fittings until I find the best permanent solution. After the hoses are on, I plug the electric fan into the harness and the custom cooling system is complete.
While Andrew's taking care of things back at the shop, I take the flex pipe templates to my friend Brian at the muffler shop to get some custom downpipes made.
All right, so this is the flex pipes I mocked up for you. I want to keep the same flanges, marked with cat should go, and then braided flex piping in the back.
All right.
First, Brian uses the flex pipe templates to make the proper mandrel bends, which create angles without creasing or collapsing the pipe. Then he cuts the bent pipe down to accommodate the catalytic converter and braided flex pipe, and the downpipe really starts to come together. When the downpipes are finished, the tailpipes need some love. We cut out the old tailpipes on the El Camino to make enough room so we could install our custom gas tank. Since either side of the cut pipe are the same size, Brian has to swedge or expand the cut ends of the tailpipes so their larger ends will slide over the original pipes and clamp together. Once all of that's done, the pipes are set and we're good to go.
All right, I'll see you again.
Well, since this engine is very similar to the Impala Super Sport, I had this idea that I would take the same kind of short run intake that was used for that engine and modify it for this one. First, I trial fit the box and mark where it needs to be trimmed down to fit. Then I use tin snips to cut out the section that interferes. But instead of removing the section completely, I just bend it back so that I can still get a mounting screw into the driver's side fender. After I make that small adjustment, the first piece called the isolation box snaps into place and I can start hooking things up. Now, just like most modern cars, there's a mass airflow sensor, which tells the computer how much fuel is needed, and a large pipe that directs air from the mass airflow sensor into the engine. I snug up all of the clamps for a tight seal. Next, I plug in the mass airflow sensor, along with a couple of other sensors that monitor air temp and pressure, and secure the home-based diffuser. What's really cool is that the isolation box in the corner there mounted beautifully to the computer box, which is a great shock mount. And the best part is I want to bring this Camino into the 21st century, so now it's going to be emissions compliant, which is very cool. To finish up, I choose a spot and mount the overflow tank, which allows the coolant to expand and contract with the heat of the engine. I run a line from the tank to the filler neck on the radiator. And finally, I add some coolant to the system, and it's ready to go. Coming up, you gotta see how we transform ordinary materials into a cool custom dash and find out how this crazy looking thing helps us decide how big we can go at the wheels. Plus, I'm rolling the dice and taking a hands-off approach to designing the paint job. So you know what? Here's what I'm saying. My vision is red, surprise me. Find out if the design is worth waiting for. The El Camino project is looking fierce. We've installed a rad custom cooling system, a super efficient short ram intake, and hooked up the throttle and shift linkage for our LT1 engine transplant. While Christy was out at the exhaust shop, I thought I would just get a little work done. You know, I had some time, so I hooked a lot of stuff up on the engine. And as cool as it is to hotwire your car every time you get in it, you know, I figured it might be a little cooler if you had a key. There are 3 wires to hook up from the computer to the ignition switch to make this thing fire from inside the car. There's a 12-volt positive lead, the starter lead that gets attached to the purple wire running to the ECU, and an ignition wire that sends power back to the computer. After I connect all 3 wires, I tape them together. But instead of using electrical tape, which looks homegrown and comes loose when it gets hot, I use friction tape like the kind they use on hockey sticks for a factory look and a tight seal.
Once I got back from getting the exhaust pieces, it was pretty simple. We raised the first downpipe into position and bolt it to the exhaust manifold at the flanges. Oxygen sensors will help the El Camino run clean and save gas, so we screw one into the downpipe and use a special slotted oxygen sensor socket from an auto parts store to tighten it up. Then we plug it into the engine harness and repeat the process on the other side. We attach the back end of the downpipes and finish up by clamping down the tailpipes at the back of the car. It was pretty much, you know, 4 clamps, 6 bolts, bada bing, bada boom.
Definitely want to go bigger than the stock wheels, but since we have that lowered spring in there, I'm not exactly sure how big we can go.
Well, I was looking at the factory specs, and we can definitely go a little bit bigger.
Yeah?
We support the control arms with a jack to compress the suspension.
And then we bolt our homemade wheelie gauge up to the rotor and give it a spin to make sure it clears the body. Usually it's okay when the wheels are straight, but runs into problems when the steering wheels turn.
Adjustment is hitting.
In that case, I adjust the wheelie gig until it clears and measure the distance from the edge of the template to the center of the hub.
12.5.
Now we know we can fit up to an 18-inch wheel on the front.
Great, that's awesome.
Let's check out the back.
In the back, we don't have to worry about turning the wheels, but I still want to make sure that the tires won't rub against the fender wells.
Paint job, thought of one?
I got some ideas floating around in my head.
Because my buddy Dustin, he does impeccable work,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
we have blue with blue flames. No? Okay.
Okay, hold that, yeah.
Okay.
All right. In my head, I have this vision. I know I want it to be red.
Well, you want it red. That's a good start. We have our brighter reds.
Here's what I'm saying. My vision is red. Surprise me. Flames or not, that's up to you.
Really?
Yep, it's
You're
up
gonna
to you.
you're
Yeah.
gonna leave this in my
Yeah,
hands?
I trust you. Before we send the car off to be painted, we remove all of the remaining trim, pull out the dash so we have something to work on while it's gone, and give it a light sanding. Then it's bye-bye El Camino, and we get to build a custom dash. The first step to building our custom dash is to remove all of the old parts. We start with the AC vents, which we'll save because they're in good shape. This radio's going too. I got a new one. It's gonna be sweet.
Really?
Yeah, it's gonna be nice.
Cool.
This one's trash. After all of the original parts are stripped off the dash, we can clean up the table and start building. So building the dash, the process was simple and yet not so simple. We traced out a template on the inside where the speedometer and all that stuff was onto a piece of cardboard. After the cardboard is cut out, we transfer the template onto a piece of thin plywood that will provide the structure for the new dash. Next, I cut out the gauge panel with a jigsaw. We mark a horizontal center line on the panel, so all of the gauges will be straight. Then, we use a compass to draw all of the gauges, equally spaced from the steering column out. We use a hole saw to drill out the smaller gauge holes. Then we switch to a larger bit for the speedometer and tach, and finish up with a jigsaw to cut out the radio opening. After some cleanup, we lay the panel on top of some high-density foam and trace the outline along with all of the mounting holes. Then we use utility knives to cut out the piece. We use spray adhesive to attach the foam to the plywood panel and lay out some elastic micro-suede that will conform to the contours of the dash. The piece is cut to a manageable size, and then we use more adhesive to attach the micro-suede. After the material is wrapped around the back of the piece, we use a staple gun to hold it tight. We just cut the center sections out of the holes. No staples are needed because once the gauges are in, they'll hold the material in place. We finally insert the gauges and the LED indicator lights and tighten them down from the back side. We pop the radio mounting sleeve into place and bend the ears up to hold it tight. Then we have one more trick to help this dash panel look the part. The kitchen cabinet handles, you know?
Right there, you say?
Yeah. Even though it's not gonna happen, but maybe like you could pull out the dash and it turns into like some other kind of like snowboard that you go, oh, you know what I mean, you know? And it just kind of added a 3D effect. Now that the drawer pulls are installed, we can finally drop the panel into the El Camino dash and admire our work. Whoa. This is a completely different car, man. This is amazing.
It's awesome.
Nice work.
Let's get it in there.
All right. Up next, the El Camino paint job heads in an unexpected direction. But will I like the changes to Christie's design? Our El Camino has left the shop to get a slick new paint job. And while it's gone, we're building this kickin' new dashboard to monitor the engine and give the interior a fresh new look. So while Christy and I were working on the dash, Dustin was mixing up his first batch of sealer coat to apply to the car.
My man Dustin starts by sealing the entire car with gray sealer to help make the color match better and lay down smooth. Next, he sprays on the base coat, which is a light silver metallic that gets mixed 1-to-1. The old El Camino gets 3 or 4 coats of silver base before the next step, which is taping off our design. Dustin convinced me racing stripes were the way to go. I think the stripes are closer to the classic look of the car than hot rod flames. Hope Andrew likes them. After Dustin masks off everything but the racing stripes, he lays down 3 more coats of silver paint. But this silver is a few shades darker than the base color to create the cool ghosting effect. After the stripes are painted on, Dustin lays down a transparent red candy paint over the entire car. But we have to wait until the next morning to see the results. Our El Camino's back from the paint shop, and take a quick look. While the car was gone, Andrew and I covered the dash in suede and popped in our new gauges. As soon as he gets back...
Christy, I'm back.
Hold on. Okay? Okay.
Oh, man. That is awesome. You kidding me? Actually, the funny thing, when I first came in, and she showed me the car, I saw the flames there, but they weren't there, you know? Then she pointed out the racing stripes, and I was like, oh, that is so sweet, and that's so subtle, and so classic, and classy at the same time.
So, another element of surprise for you, my friend.
Oh,
Don't touch
nice.
it.
I'm not. All right. All right, well, let's get back to work.
Let's
get
do
to work
it.
so we can drive this thing, because I want to show it off now.
Let's do it.
First, we pop the cowl into place and carefully replace the screws so we don't scratch the new paint. Then, we pop on the windshield trim and the windshield wiper arms before we move to the front and start on the headlights. Well, the tuner cars, it's easy. It's almost like Legos. You know what I mean? But when you get to these and you buy some aftermarket trim and stuff like that, it can become a challenge sometimes to make it fit right, make it straight. After the headlights, we bring in the new SS-style grille and screw it into place. Next, we install the hood trim up top. It's like we're accessorizing.
We are accessorizing.
And the piece de resistance, the hood spear. Hello.
When we were putting our bumpers on, we used absorbent protective matting to protect our paint job.
When the padding is taped on, we very carefully raise the bumper into position and bolt it into place to complete the front end. In the back, I replace the bed trim, and then I get to pop in the beautiful El Camino emblem. Reinstall the tail lights and the tailgate emblem as well. All right, here it is, the last piece of trim.
Last piece. After I protect the rear end with more padding, Andrew's ready to finish things up with the back bumper. Andrew tightens up the nuts while I carefully peel off the tape to remove the matting. And we get our first look at the completed rear end. Look at her.
Very nice. Good work. That looks beautiful. Hey, but let's get the dashboard in. Hey, man, there are some things in life that you have to fight. You know? It's in.
Is it really?
Yeah. It's easy to lock the pad down with washers and nuts. Then we can finally bring in our new custom dash. Once we get the dash lined up, there are a few screws along the top to put in, and then I try using a little muscle to line up the rest of the mounting holes. Eventually, things start to pop into place. So I replace the steering column bracket, and we work together to lock in the dash. When all of the bolts are in, I replace the key switch and the AC controls, and Christy brings in the gauge panel. Ooh, nice. Once we trim away some of the extra wiring and tape off some dead ends, we go to work pre-wiring the gauges. You can start putting these purple wires together 2 by 2. After the pre-wiring is done, we fit the gauge panel into place. Nice. Oh, yeah, that looks really cool. Once the panel is in, Christy screws it down while I replace the steering column mount. Then we pop on the steering wheel and the dash install is complete. The back wheels go on perfectly, but since we couldn't order the exact size we needed for the fronts, we have to use spacers to make them fit right. And if you have your heart set on a particular wheel style, they can be just what the doctor ordered. Look at that. That's amazing. I wish I could see all sides at once. Oh.
She's pretty. She's really pretty.
Wow, man, that is a mean machine right there, I'm telling you.
Nice work.
Thanks.
Awesome.
You can't have a cool ride without some loud tunes. Hey, listen, we're getting a custom sub box so the El Camino will rock. Oh, word. Nice. That is sweet looking, man. But there's a problem when we get the box back to the shop. All right, hold on. We may be driving in silence. Stick around to see if we can fix the stereo setback. Next. We're resto modding a 1966 Chevy El Camino, and it's really starting to shine. Today, we're upgrading the interior and stereo system to match the killer resto mod theme. And the punch for our system is going to come from this custom-made sub box. I've built subs before on my own. I built like a plexiglass clear one once, which was really cool. And I encourage people to build them if they can. In the El Camino, the box will be hidden behind the seat. I decided to custom order a simple, pro-built box that will hold up forever and sound great.
Oh, good work, thanks you.
Once we get the sub box back, I test fit the components in place. The speaker and the amp fit great, but there's a problem with the floor in the car.
We had to put legs on it because there's a hump in the middle of the Camino, and rather than drilling out a huge hump in the box, we just built legs to go above it.
We cut off short sections of 2x4 to provide support, and then we screw them into the bottom front corners of the box. Mounting the components into the box is no big deal. I just drop the sub into the hole and drill out the mounting holes all the way around. Christy decides to go ahead and hook up the speaker wires that run to the sub before she mounts the amp to the box, since it's much easier to reach. It takes both of us to screw in the sub. And we work in a star pattern, like tightening a wheel to keep from warping the basket.
Then Andrew and I carry the box in.
We attach the power and ground cables to the amp along with the remote turn-on lead. And Christy hooks up a fuse in the power line before stripping off the end of the cable, adding an eyelet connector, and attaching it to the battery. Then we put the amp cover on to finish up the sub box install.
Very cool.
Awesome.
All right, let's get the seats back in.
Once the seat bottom is in position, it's easy to tighten up the nuts. And the seat backs in this El Camino just slide onto the center pivot pin and get an axle nut hammered on the outside hinge to hold them in place. When we finish, you'd never know that there's a killer
Now we're gonna
box.
finish out the system with some speakers in the kick panels and a hot DVD playing head unit. Come on, man. I'm all about jams. You know what I'm saying? I love the jams. So why not have more jammage? You know what I mean? Just inundating my head. But the kick panels are great. We picked them up. They had speakers already in them. Replacing the old kick panels, putting these in, they were just a little bit bigger in some spots. So we just had to trim them down. It's real easy. It's like molded plastic, you know, so you just have to get some snips. So you just take your time, trim around, slide it in. Sweet.
Once we get the kick panels to fit, we run the wires from the new speakers over to the center of the dash, and then it's finally time to wire up the head unit.
Yeah, so the wiring for the radio, it's cool because, I mean, the radio that we picked up, and a lot of radios come with this little wiring harness pigtail that you plug into the back of the radio and it comes off with these wires, and then you have to just take all your leads from your speakers and your antenna and your remotes and all that kind of stuff, pull it through the dash, and then just wire away.
First, we hook up the preamp output to the wires that we ran underneath the carpet to the amp. Then we plug the harness in, and the antenna, and we use wire ties to neaten up the wiring before we tuck it into the dash and slide the head unit into place. There's a trim bezel that snaps on to hide the brackets, and then we pop the faceplate on and try out the new system.
All right, I got a surprise for you now.
What?
Turn the car on. Just on. I took some DVD of the car before we painted it.
No way.
Yes, I did. Check it out. Come on, that's cool.
That is, that's awesome. Oh, no. That's crazy.
Isn't that cool? Look what we did to this thing, man. Look what it used to look like. Remember when I drove up the first day?
It was awful.
Look
it was
at that
awful. Look at it.
To install the custom steering wheel, first I have to slide on an adapter ring and secure it with the steering wheel nut. Then, I tighten up the nut, and it takes 2 hands to hold the suede trimmed steering wheel and trim ring in place while we secure it with hex head screws. Finally, we stick the shift indicator on top of the column to complete the El Camino Resto mod.
Hey, wanna go for a drive?
Only if you drive.
All right, I'll drive. Let's go. Oh man, that was amazing. I couldn't wait to get it out of here. What I found while driving it, first of all, I felt Mac Daddy style, you know? I mean, I was rolling down, just feeling good. Everybody was staring at me.
You'd never know this monster had all new parts on the inside while retaining the look of yesterday. The interior is smoking with a custom dash, new gauges, and DVD player. Under the hood, we have a modern fuel-injected engine with an automatic overdrive transmission. There's hot new suspension components all the way around and new brakes that stop on a dime. And outside, it's unbelievable.
I think putting the modern parts that we put in it just makes it that much more exciting to drive, you know? Because when you drive it with the old parts in it, yeah, it's exciting, you're in an El Camino. Like, let's say it was decked out like this with all the old parts in it, you know? Yeah, I'm in an El Camino and it looks cool.
We started with a junk heap and ended up with one hot resto ride.